Welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast, where I talk with the world's leading thinkers, planners, and doers who are helping to build great companies in their own way. We learn how the work they're doing is creating an impact and get to know a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. Also, you can check out our books, Made to Thrive, outlining how to be a great CEO, as well as Onboarded, which is about making your new hires more effective faster. David Rendall started life as a pigeon-toed baby in Milwaukee. When he was 11 years old, his parents sent him to school with patches in his pants. He decided that this was unacceptable, so he began collecting aluminium cans from dumpsters and got a job delivering newspapers at 5 o'clock every morning. Since then, he's been a stock boy, lawn boy, caddy, painter, janitor, tutor, resident assistant, job coach, supervisor, non-profit manager, and senior executive. One day, maybe he'll find the right job. He still can't sit still, he can't be quiet, and he can't do what he's told. He's also too idealistic and bad at managing details. All of these weaknesses help him to succeed as a speaker, leadership professor, stand-up comedian, and endurance athlete. David has a Doctor of Management degree as well as graduate degree in psychology. David, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, it's today for you. It's yesterday for me. Who knows what's going on here between the U.S. and Australia?
Anything is possible as in today's climate. So
I love having a bunch of Australian friends. I've spoken in Australia probably, I don't know, over 15 years, and I've spoken probably 30, 40, 50 times over that time. And so when my birthday starts, well, before my birthday starts in America, I start getting messages from my Australian friends and then from people in India, and then it kind of gradually works its way around. So it's nice knowing people in Australia and kicking off the birthday celebrations about 14 hours early or something like that.
Good stuff, good stuff. I have crossed the international date line myself and lost a birthday. I keep telling myself.
Oh, you lost it.
I lost it. I was in LA and I was traveling with a friend from a US conference as where we originally met. And I literally, the whole birthday disappeared because you lose a day, right? And it was just, it wasn't planned. It was just a coincidence. So the day before we were at the airport, and my friend and I said, look, it's my birthday. I'm going to miss it. And so we had a long layover. So we jumped in an Uber, went down to Santa Monica Beach and grabbed probably the best steak of my life, to be honest, and had a candle on it, scoffed it down, back to the airport, jumped on, and then, yeah. So anyway, welcome to the podcast.
I've always fantasized about the opposite way, because if you start in Australia on your birthday, then your birthday just keeps going for like 36 hours if you go to the west coast of the United States. So that's the way to do it, is get extra birthday.
I love it. I love it. So welcome to the podcast. Let's start with the question. So, Dave, why don't you like normal people?
That's easy. I don't think there are any. I think that's a lie. I think it's a mistake. There's a great book called The End of Average by Todd Rose. And he basically explains that if you could find an average or normal person, they'd be the wildest person you've ever met, because no one's the average height, the average weight, with the average length of marriage and the average job with the average house. It just doesn't happen. And people don't even have average bodies. That's one of the examples he gives in there. Your arms are a little longer than average, even if your height is average, or your legs are a little longer than average, or your head's a little bigger than average. So it's not that I hate normal people. It's that I think most people that appear normal are just pretending, because they think it's what they're supposed to do in order to be liked, accepted, successful, etc. So, that's, somebody said that to me once. My talk's called The Freak Factor, my book's called The Freak Factor, and somebody said, well, isn't this sort of antagonistic to normal people? And that's, I think that's the answer, is that there aren't normal people. Everybody's got uniqueness, at least a small amount of uniqueness, and there's no such thing as somebody who's sort of perfectly normal.
There isn't, and it kind of perhaps speaks to what's going on inside someone's head, and negative biases and the way that we think that we should be, and negative self-talk and everything else. But I love that there's a depth of intelligence behind the work that you're doing, because on the surface, what the video viewers can see is different to what the listeners can hear. We've got pink everywhere. I mean, you're 6'6", yeah?
6'6", yeah.
The average time when you go to speak at a conference, could you describe your outfit, perhaps?
Oh, that's perfect, because I just got back from Abilene, Texas, which is about 2 hours west of Dallas, which I think is where we met the first time at the Scaling Up Summit, or what was called the Fortune Growth Summit at the time.
Yeah.
I was just in Texas, and I was wearing a pink cowboy hat that's actually right behind me for those who are watching. And wore it out in the wild for the first time, which was actually a gift from when I spoke in Texas a number of years ago. I had a pink suit jacket on with a pink shirt and pink pants and pink shoes and pink socks. And I have a pink watch and a pink wedding ring and pink tattoos and a pink car. And I was talking about my book, Pink Goldfish, which is about standing out and being unique. Funny, you asked that. It's funny because that exact event where we met, I wore pink shirt, pink pants, pink shoes, no pink cowboy hat at the time. And I think I had pink glasses, though. And a man saw me at that. And then that night, after my keynote, he said, "I saw you this morning with that pink outfit, and I didn't know what you were up to." He goes, "I decided you must be European or something." So he needed to find some kind of context for it. And what's hilarious is Vern, who ran the Growth Summits, asked me to do the European Growth Summits. And I couldn't do it the next year because I was already booked. So we did it the year after that, 2017. And I told that story every time, and the Europeans thought it was hilarious because they're not wearing all pink. Like, I don't know where you got the idea that I was European. So, yeah, it's all pink. I have 3 daughters, and so I started telling jokes years ago about how living with all women is turning me into a woman. Some of it silly, some of it, actually true. And started wearing a little bit of pink, and it turned into a great way to differentiate, a great way to stand out, a great way to be memorable. And it's just become kind of a signature. And when people think of pink, they think of me. And when they need to remember a speaker, they tend to remember me because I stand out from the crowd, which is part of what I'm trying to communicate. And so it's a little bit of practicing what you preach.
And there's depth to it. And that's what I love. I love it that from the outside, who's this party boy? Now, that's he's an outrageous person, is what one might think, like the Texas friend that you mentioned.
Yeah.
But having kind of got to know you a little bit over time and read your work and got to understand, like, there's a good depth to it, and rather than wearing a grey suit and banging the table about differentiation, like you said, you live it, but also this is how an example of how you can do it. So I love that, and I guess looking at the number of jobs that you've had over time, it kind of feels like you've found your spot in spreading this message, because you started. I seem to recall you started, or many years ago, you were travelling in Western Australia through the country, I think you said, travelling and teaching, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it is, you're right on about finding the right fit. I mean, that's really my message, is that you're not weird, or weird isn't bad. Everybody's weird, but weird isn't bad. Weird isn't a weakness when you find the right spot. So a lot of those jobs were just survival. When you're delivering newspapers when you're 12 years old, to buy clothes, to buy shoes, to buy your food when you're on sporting trips with your school, to just, help your parents pay the bills. You're not looking for the right fit. And back then I didn't know what the right fit was. And I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking, what's a possible way for me to make some money? But now I've been a keynote speaker for 15 plus years. I've stopped even doing the teaching, the being a leadership professor, because the business got too busy for me to do both of those things. And I think I have really found kind of the thing I can do until I can't do anything anymore. And that's the goal that I have for other people is to find the place where all of the things that look like your weaknesses, can't sit still, can't be quiet, can't do what you're told, are strengths. And where, being silly, being outrageous, being funny, goofing around. I do a lot of MC work now. That's what I was doing the week before last. And I got to introduce Gene Simmons, the lead singer from Kiss. The company that I do the emceeing for, your job as the MC is to get people's attention, and they allow me to be pretty outrageous, and they encourage it, and their people love it, and then they encourage it, and we create kind of this cycle. And I'm doing the kinds of things that would have gotten me in a lot of trouble at school for being disruptive, for being ridiculous, or to your point, that even people could still criticize me for as an adult for being unprofessional, or not being serious enough, or not being appropriate, or whatever it happens to be, and using those as tools, to your point, not just to be ridiculous, but to be ridiculous to get people's attention, so they listen to me when I tell them when the buses are leaving for the dinner tonight, or who the next speaker is going to be, or where you go for lunch, or which room your next meeting is in. I get people's attention by entertaining them and surprising them, and then I use that attention to teach, or to instruct, or to just provide boring details that otherwise people wouldn't pay attention to if they weren't already interested or laughing or enjoying themselves in some way.
Love it. In the introduction, there's a whole load of fun, but I love the way, and we mentioned this before we started recording, I love the way it's anchored by, here's a Doctor of Management degree and a graduate degree in psychology. And I look at that and I think about the trajectory of your career. And as I best understand it, it started talking to children or younger people about if you're different, it's okay. Like it's actually a positive. And then I look at the Freak Factor book and the speaking around that, and then Pink Goldfish and just how it's evolved. And I love the way that it's been a message that is fantastic for kids, but sometimes perhaps at the very beginning, entrepreneurs or leaders might have been scratching their head over, and then you've just kind of continued to say, and this is how it applies in this circumstance, and this is how it applies. So maybe tell us a little bit about that, and let's jump into the Freak Factor.
Yeah. Actually, Kids was kind of an evolution. It really started as kind of a career. How can you find the right fit, right? You've been involved in the past in Entrepreneurs Organization, and one of their big things is experience shares. And that's really what the Freak Factor is. It's a big experience share. It was like, wait a second, I'm finding more happiness and more fulfillment doing all of the things that people spent my whole life forcibly trying to keep me from doing. And now I realize that that's exactly what I should be doing. I wonder if this might be helpful to other people. So I started sharing it mostly to adults because I taught a lot of non-traditional students and to people who were looking to make changes in their career and improve. And then I started realizing, well, this is also would help when you're managing people. This would help to help people be more engaged, but this would also help with parenting, but this would also help with your relationships with your partner. This would also help kids, so it really just kept evolving. In fact, I would do the presentation for executives or entrepreneurs, oftentimes about managing people, getting the best out of people, finding strength where everyone else sees weakness, tapping into talent that other people miss because they're busy seeing what's wrong or weird about somebody and don't see the upside to that. And people's response very regularly would be, thanks, Dave, I've got a kid with ADHD. Thanks, Dave, I've got a kid with dyslexia. Thanks, Dave, I've got a kid with autism. What can you do for them? What can you do for me, for them? How can you? And so that's where the kids book came from, was a follow-up to, all of these people saying, thank you, and I care about my business, but I care more about my children. Even most of my entrepreneurs organizations talks these days, people say, well, we get good learning events, but we don't have a lot of family learning events where it's relevant for the whole family. So I talk to the kids, or even if they won't do a whole family event, they want to bring their spouses. So it's really, you're right, it's evolved from, this idea can help you have a better career, to this can help you have better relationships with your spouse or your partner. This can help you be a better parent. This can help you manage your business better. And really that core idea is just that experience that I had that now I've seen other examples of, is how the things that looked like my weaknesses were also strengths. And if we're looking carefully and we're paying attention, we can see that our employees' weaknesses also have strengths. Our children's weaknesses often have strengths. Our spouse or partner's weaknesses often have strengths. And once you have that insight, you can start to see how it changes almost every part of your life, and how you can improve in every area of your life with that one simple idea. And that's even what Pink Goldfish is now, that what I was talking to some folks who run downtown economic development groups in the United States. It's also true for organizations, that your organization's weaknesses also have strengths. Your community's weaknesses also have strengths. I mean, the great thing about some parts of Australia is they're so remote. Well, what's the frustrating thing about some parts of Australia is they're very remote. The great thing about some parts of Australia is they're very harsh. What's the amazing thing and wonderful thing about some of those places? They're very harsh, and people want to go into the bush. They want to go into the outback. They want to have that experience. But it's a tough place. I mean, you've got Coober Pedy. I mean, what's the great thing about Coober Pedy in Australia? It's underground. What's the thing that a lot of people would get real tired of real fast would be living underground, and you have to live underground because of how harsh the conditions are above ground. But it's an amazing place, and it's a terrible place. It's a wonderful place, and it's a difficult place. So the message just keeps growing and expanding, that this one simple idea that weaknesses can be strengths, disadvantages can be advantages, just keeps expanding in its applications. And then that's what I do, is keep traveling around talking about that to people.
Thank you. I want to pick up on something that you quickly mentioned through there, is ADHD. ADHD, dyslexia, a lot of these neurodivergent challenges that people can be faced with as employees or their children or entrepreneurs or leaders. Tell us about how I don't think that you set off your journey thinking or having that at the forefront, but I think that what I've seen is over time there's been it's resonated really well with people who have this, let's say, in their lives in whatever form. So tell us about how over time that's changed your message or the way that you think and feel about this whole situation.
Well, so a couple of things. I think, first of all, we like to, pathologize things that don't need to be pathologized, and then look down on or be critical of people or stigmatize people who shouldn't be stigmatized and don't need to be looked down on, and in fact may end up being better and more successful than the person doing the stigmatizing and the looking down on. So it's really just a strategic thing in my speaking. If you're telling people that weaknesses are strengths, one of the skepticisms that people will have is, yes, that might be true for others, but you don't understand how bad my particular weaknesses are, or you don't understand how terrible my partner is, or how bad my children are, or how difficult my employees are. So you can't get a bigger weakness sort of than a diagnosable disability. Right. Yeah. I use an example of a guy who was born without arms. And just even recently, I've been using this story for years. I met him years ago, but he just won the gold medal in the Paralympics in Paris. Wow. In archery. So he's a person without arms who won a gold medal in archery against people with arms. Like of all the things you could be struggling with, you would think no arms is the thing that would even keep you from ever even trying that. So even though the other person has some kind of disability, they're in the Paralympics, they're using both arms. They're doing it 99% like another person would, and this guy's using his legs and his shoulder to do archery, and he's beating other people. His name is Matt Stutzman. So I use examples like that: dyslexia, ADHD, autism. First of all, because there's amazing specific stories of someone who has that diagnosis, who's done something amazing because of the disability, not in spite of it, because of the advantage, the upside, the strength, but also because it undercuts that feeling that people can have as they listen, saying, right, Dave, but you don't understand how disorganized I am, or you don't understand how intense I am, or you don't understand how obsessive I am, or you don't really realize. And so if I can take it all the way to, even if you have a diagnosable, mental disorder based on, the diagnostic and statistical manual that psychologists and psychiatrists use, there's still an upside. Even if you're missing your arms, there's an upside. It undercuts that feeling that people can have where they kind of check out and go, that's true for, oh, that's cute, Dave, you talked a little too much, now you get paid to talk, but you don't understand, I got real problems, right? So I use quote unquote real problems as a way to illustrate that if these very extreme weaknesses have incredible strengths, then certainly the more moderate ones that a lot of people feel like they're facing have strengths as well. And it's also because a lot of those things apply to me. I think, when I was a kid, ADHD, if it was a label, would have been a label people put on me. Back then, it was just, you're a bad person, you're undisciplined, you're rebellious, you're a problem, you're hyperactive. But there was it was just, you're a bad person who isn't trying hard enough and doesn't have self-control. There was no sense that you might be wired differently. And as much as we use ADHD as a stigma, it at least provides an explanation other than just you're a loser or whatever it happens to be. But when I was younger, that's sort of all it was. So that gives me a piece of that as well, that my behavior was always stigmatized. My approach to things was always completely written off as inappropriate and unacceptable. And also, I think I do it because I started my career working with people with developmental disabilities, and I saw the strengths that are oftentimes hiding in tremendous disability. In fact, I think that's a good thing to talk about for a second. I was helping people with disabilities, pretty extreme disabilities, to have job opportunities, mostly people with intellectual disabilities, IQs of 70, 75. People are never going to learn to read, never going to learn math. It's not a matter of trying or helping or medicine. The person doesn't have the fundamental capacity to do quite a few things, including things like sometimes taking care of basic needs that they might have, getting dressed, shaving, things like that. And then my job was to help people like that find jobs in a world that certainly isn't seeking out people with significant disabilities, disadvantages. And the one unique thing about a developmental disability, in the category in general, is you don't fix it, you don't change it. Okay. Yeah. You don't give somebody a bigger IQ than they used to have. You can help the person learn to manage their life better, but there's never been a story of, oh yeah, and then we got that person to read. Oh, then we got that person doing calculus. Yeah. Like that doesn't happen. And there's no real effort to do that. So what I learned was the only two things that matter is, what does the person like and what are they good at? All I can do is work with what I have, and all they can do is work with what they have. It's no use talking about, and that's all people would love to do. Oh, this person has this problem and this difficulty and this inadequacy and this deficiency, and that's all anybody's talked about for most of that person's life because it's the most obvious thing. And I'm like, in vocational rehabilitation, the only thing that matters is what can the person do and what are they good at. And so I push people to stop with all of that sort of deficit thinking and focus on what is there. Have more of a strengths-based mindset. What do they like? What are they good at? And that's the only way. Yeah, the guy is blind. The guy has a very low IQ, but he can count and he can feel 3 of those things and he can count them out and he can put them in the bag, and then that can be passed to the next person, and that can be part of the work that the person gets when they get their IKEA furniture, and now they have 3 bolts in the bag every time. And in fact, he's going to do that better than Brad might do it, because Brad's going to be bored out of his mind. He's going to be talking to his neighbor. He's going to be lobbing over his shoulder. He's going to forget to even put them in sometimes because it's so beneath Brad's abilities that Brad might not be able to even focus on that. But for this guy, he's got to seek them out. He's got to feel the 3. He's got to count the 3. Counting to 3 is a significant thing for him because counting is something that isn't easy for him. And he's going to appreciate having something worthwhile to do instead of sitting around doing nothing all day and not having anything that he can accomplish. And so what I discovered was, I think that same mindset is really true for everyone. I think the only thing that matters for any of your employees is what are they like and what are they good at. I think the only thing that matters for any of your kids is what are they like and what are they good at. I think the only thing that matters for your career is what do you like and what are you good at. How do you build on what you have? How do you tap into and go farther? I have a new online assessment based on the Freak Factor called Amplify. How do you put yourself in situations where you have the opportunity to turn up the volume on who you are when we live in a world that always wants you to moderate, reduce, and eliminate it?
Two things. What's the URL for Amplify assessment, assuming it's there? Like, if you could just quickly give us the URL.
Yep, it's amplifytest.com. Amplify is spelled like Wi-Fi, though, so Amplify ends with an I, and amplifytest.com. We're still in the testing phases of it, but it is available for people to check out and test. Yep.
Thank you. Now, second point, you said the person who was doing the boxing could do a better job, and I want to pick up on the word better. There's a lady in Melbourne who was, I'm going to get this slightly wrong, she was the person of the year for the advertising and marketing industry. So she's an autistic lady and has built a marketing firm, hiring only, let's say, predominantly neurodivergent people. And I found it really interesting. It's one of the big, I guess, changes in perspective that I've had over the last 3 or 4 years is getting to understand her story. And what she said is that people who've been rejected by society, in a sense, the loyalty, the commitment, and the ability to focus and do actually much better work, like there's a real untapped resource here that we might not have considered. And at first blush, I was like, well, that's just what you're going to say, until I actually looked at it, right?
Right.
And so I'll give you a quick example. So she said one of the things that we changed in our interview process is we said, at the end, we said, are there any questions that you want to redo? Because some of the people with some of the conditions, they obsess over the fact that, I answered that one wrong, I'm never going to get the job. And she said, and we genuinely delete everything to do with the old answer and then we put it back in. Yeah. And it's little things like that. And when they get an onboarding gift, they give them headphones because they need to operate in an undisturbed audio environment.
Reduce that stimulation. Right.
Yeah. So it's little things. But she said the productivity that we get is amazing. The creativity is amazing if we can just tailor what we do a little bit toward that. So it's interesting because it kind of plays in. I was thinking about how what she's done plays into what you're saying, which is, our weaknesses could be our strengths.
Well, so let's stick with that autism example because that's one of the ones I use. There's a company called Specialisterne that started in Denmark when a man saw that his son, they were trying to fix the fact that his autism had him hyper-focusing and doing things repetitively, and that's one core kind of set of symptoms of autism. Then he noticed that at work, they needed software testers who could hyper-focus and do the same thing over and over again, and that neurotypical people weren't actually very good at hyper-focusing and doing the same thing over and over again, and people with autism were quite good at it. And this is the key point. So he built a company, not a nonprofit. He built a company called Specialisterne to hire people with autism to do software testing. And they weren't just good, they were better than people without autism. So I think that's one of the key points. Is because sometimes people think, okay, isn't it cute that if we really bend over backwards, we can help this disadvantaged person to have an opportunity. And even though they're not going to perform as well, we're going to kind of be nice to them. And so one of the cool things that I like, they've been so good, is that now SAP, for example, the global software company, has started hiring hundreds of people with autism on an ongoing basis because they found that the person is better, not even though they have autism, but because of their autism. And that other people, you said at the beginning, why do I hate normal people? That the quote-unquote normal people aren't actually good at that job because they can't do what the job requires. And that goes back to our idea of fit. So he's then gone on, his name is Thorkild Son, to create something called the Specialisterne Foundation, where they promote this different perspective with people with autism all over the world. And they created these little ads, and one of my favorites because it shows the weakness-strength combination so perfectly, and that we're not asking for charity. It says it's a person doing screening at the airport, right? Screening people's bags at the airport. Doing that monotonous, repetitive, easy to get distracted, and how often do you find anything, easy to get bored and feel like you're not doing anything. And the person says, I won't look you in the eye, because that's one of the characteristics that's very common. It's not exclusive, right? Sometimes people don't struggle with that, but it's a very common trait of someone with autism to not be comfortable making that eye contact and to not have that same level as a neurotypical person would. I won't look you in the eye, which might cost me the interview, might cost me relationships with people even if I do get the job, might cause me to be passed over because I'm, again, not quote-unquote normal. I won't look you in the eye, but I see things that other people miss. In a job where the whole thing is security, seeing things that other people miss. So that's the real thing, is that I'm not looking people in the eye because I'm busy focusing on other things. And in this case, the job isn't customer service. In fact, it's sort of the opposite. It's assuming every customer might be a threat and looking through their stuff with a critical eye of, is there something wrong here, and finding things that other people might miss. So that's what I think is so crucial, is that I'm not pushing this, let's be nice to people who are different, even though they're going to be inferior, and you're supposed to accept that inferiority to a quote-unquote normal or good person. It's recognizing that there's that these people are above average, and that everybody is in these different things, and that people have a unique place where Matt Stutzman isn't just a gold medalist in the Paralympics. He holds the world record for the longest, most accurate shot in archery against people with arms, without arms. He's the world record holder in that category, not even though he doesn't have arms, but because he doesn't have arms. And he uses his leg, which, as he explained to me, gives him more strength and more stability, which gives him more accuracy, because a leg is always bigger and stronger than anybody's arm is going to be. So he's better because he doesn't use his arms in a sport that seems to exclusively require arms. And that's why I use that example. The autism example is amazing. People with ADHD can do things not just better, they can do things that people without ADHD can't do. People with dyslexia, their approach gives them seemingly the ability to see things, to think, to behave in a way that people without dyslexia simply can't do. It's not a difference that makes people worse. It's a difference that makes them better. And when we start seeing that, then if we want to have a better company, we want to seek these people out. We're not looking for reasons to exclude people. We're looking for ways to find that right person and have maybe a broader definition of what a good person is, right? What a good employee is. And as parents, a broader definition of what a successful child is, a broader definition of what a partner or a spouse is. And maybe even for our own selves, a broader, more accepting definition of what a good CEO is, what a good entrepreneur is, what a good person is.
That's what I love about your work, is it's not charity. Like, there is an economic imperative that is underlying here. I guess I've spent my whole career as and with entrepreneurs. The number of times I've heard someone say that they are dyslexic or ADHD or whatever, it is much, much, much more prevalent in the entrepreneurial world, in my experience. And I interviewed on the podcast a DNA researcher who said in that person's experience as well, in all of the leader and entrepreneurs that they'd worked with, it was the same. So
they did a study too. It's not just anecdotal. I referenced this in my presentation. 35% of entrepreneurs in a study that they did in the U.S. had dyslexia, and certainly that wasn't a comprehensive survey of every single entrepreneur who'd ever done anything in the United States. But in their sample of entrepreneurs, and that's significant because only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. And when dyslexia is considered a disability, you'd think that there'd be almost no quote unquote successful people in any, with dyslexia in any group, much less a higher percentage than the amount of people there would normally be. So again, it starts to challenge that idea that dyslexia is exclusively a disability or disadvantage, and it indicates there's something more to the sort of constellation of characteristics that people with dyslexia have, and that their approach to life seems to be more adaptive than we give them credit for when we analyze them through the lens of school and testing and reading and those kinds of things.
It's one lens.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is. It's a multifaceted lens. So in this environment, leaders, entrepreneurs, with, I'll say, challenges through that lens, who find themselves in a business, how can they use that? Because they would be struggling in a normative sense. So how can they use that as their strength, that perceived weakness in other areas, once they find themselves in a leadership or entrepreneurial position?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's part of it is how you craft the position. So I'll give you an example. I think one of the mistakes when I did Vern Harnish's growth summits in Europe, it was Amsterdam, Berlin, and Barcelona. And so people have paid for the growth summit. They've paid for high growth advice in this event. And I basically said in all of them, but specifically in Berlin, maybe you shouldn't have a high growth company. Maybe you shouldn't run a big company. Maybe you should run a small company and one that grows slowly over time and maybe even stays kind of small. Maybe a big company isn't right for you. Maybe solopreneur is right for you. Don't have the goal of being big just to be big. Ask yourself, what's the right fit for me? So I think that's part of it, is not being an entrepreneur or a CEO who creates a bad job for yourself, creates a bad fit for yourself because you think that's what people are supposed to do, right? I read a book a long time ago by Dan Pink called Free Agent Nation. It was kind of my first entrepreneur book. And I love the quote at the end. He said, bigger isn't better, better is better, right? So I think the biggest part for entrepreneurs is not to say what is a quote unquote good business. It's to say, what is a good business for me? When I used to be a college professor, people would say, should I get a master's degree? And I would say, I don't know. What do you want to do? And does what you want to do require a master's degree? Should I go to school online or in person? Well, I don't know. Are you a person who enjoys working independently, who's a very good reader, and you enjoy writing? Or do you like to interact? Do you like to ask questions? Do you respond better when you can listen to the information? Because those are two totally different environments, and one isn't better or worse, but one of them is better or worse for you, right?
Yeah.
Master's degrees aren't good or bad. They're good when you have certain goals. Online education isn't good or bad. It's good or bad for certain kinds of people. So certain types of businesses, the way you run your business, the role you take in your business, what you delegate in your business, I think all should be taking on this strengths-based perspective of, am I doing what I do best, and am I handing off what I don't do best, instead of saying, if I was better, if I was more professional, if I was more disciplined, I'd be good at all the stuff. I'd be good at the spreadsheets and the people and the sales and the marketing and the strategy and the... That's not reality. The reality is you're going to have some strengths and play off of those, do those, be in that situation where you're fulfilled and you're happy and you have the greatest potential for success. And then bring in other people, this is the other piece of it then, who are strong where you're weak. Development isn't continually changing yourself to turn yourself into someone else. It's finding those relationships and those connections to build a solid team where each person is shoring up the other person's weakness, instead of everybody feeling like they have to be everything to everybody all the time. I think that's the biggest, the biggest application for entrepreneurs and leaders. And then also giving other people permission to do the same. Peter Drucker, one of the quotes I use on my talk, Peter Drucker said, organizations exist to make people's strengths effective and their weaknesses irrelevant. So I think if you're talking about what's the payoff of this, if you wake up every day and you make your strengths effective and your weaknesses irrelevant. But we live in a world, and you live in it too, because it's this cult of improvement that says get out of your comfort zone, no pain, no gain, do the thing that you don't want to do, all this kind of stuff that really goes against what I'm talking about. It sounds good and it sounds tough. Get in the cold bath or whatever. It sounds good and it sounds tough, but it's not, because there's already somebody who's way better at that and does it naturally and does it effortlessly and does it fluidly. And while you're busy grinding it out, trying to get better at marketing or trying to get better at accounting or whatever it is, there's somebody else who it's their passion, it's their love. I mean, I ask people now in my talks, raise your hand if Excel fuels your soul, Microsoft Excel. And hands go up, right? And other people are like, you've got to be kidding me. It drains my soul. And I'm like, that's exactly right. I can teach you how to do Excel. A CEO can learn how to do Excel better, but you can't learn to make Excel fuel your soul. And so you need to do what fuels your soul and give other people permission to do the things that fuel their soul, and avoid that distraction trap of, I have to become this different kind of person if I'm going to be the CEO of this organization. I have to become a different. I told the entrepreneurs in Berlin, if you're not a big company person and you don't enjoy that, and you don't like it past 2 years of startup, 3 years of startup, then keep starting up and keep handing it off, keep selling it, keep hiring other people to manage, there's a million ways. Good people aren't good at every level of business growth and development, and you don't need to be. You don't have to grow up. You don't have to wear a suit. You don't have to get excited about spreadsheets and profit and loss and stuff like that. You can be a creator, hand off what you've created, and start creating again. So I think people feel a pressure, again, even once they've moved beyond society standards. Starting a business is outside of the norm of society. But even once they've blown up those expectations, they still feel these other kinds of expectations to change with their business and other things, and think if they were a good person or a successful person or a disciplined person, they could keep doing that, instead of saying, that's not for me. And maybe I could do that, but that's not what I love, and I don't do it as well as starting things up, for example. And some of those people who can manage an ongoing business very, very well have never started anything. And so they have that strength, but if nobody started anything, they wouldn't have a business to manage. So I think it's about finding that fit for you, helping other people find that fit. And then also, to your point from earlier, discovering, that talent where nobody else is looking. When you look at the same colleges, at the same people with the same skills, and you're fighting for that same talent all the time, you're not going to win against your competition. It's finding and being open to finding talent in places that no one else is looking, and that people might actively be rejecting, that you're going to find a competitive advantage in your industry against your competitors.
And that's the job to be done for a leader or entrepreneur, is to find your fit. That was the phrase I think that you just used, right? You got to find what are the things, what we would normally say to people is what brings you energy and what drains your energy. Kind of the same thing.
No, 100%.
Double down on the things that bring your energy. Now, in the introduction, I said we help you build the right strategic plan for your business. Now, one of the things in your book that you said, actually, I'll go one step backwards. What that means is a component of that is building a strategy that's different, a strategy that is differentiated, where what I normally say is they're playing basketball and you're playing soccer or chess or something. Like, it's a completely different offering for the market. And we spend a lot of time with companies on that differentiation. Now, in your book, one of the stats that you quote is that a lot of companies talk big on differentiation. They talk big about being different, but I think it's only 3% of companies are different. Tell us about that, if you will.
Well, the reason for that, there's a great book called Different. It's right over my shoulder there, by Young-Mi Moon, and she is a Harvard marketing professor. And she says, everybody knows that differentiation is crucial, but the number of companies that achieve competitive separation is depressingly small. And the reason is the exact thing we've been talking about for people as for companies. Differentiation always looks like a mistake. It looks like a weakness. It looks like a problem. It looks like a disadvantage. So nobody chooses the different approach because the industry standard at that time makes that approach look wrong, look ineffective, look unproductive, whatever. A great example that's relatively recent is Snapchat. When Snapchat came out, before it came out, the founder was in business school and he presented this idea of this photo app where the pictures disappear. The response was exclusively negative from everyone about the part that it disappears. Instagram already existed as a photo app, so why is he going to put out another photo app that's just like Instagram, but maybe quote unquote better? So everybody told him this is a bad idea. He didn't get a great grade from his professor, and a venture capitalist in the room said, I'll support you if you cut the part where the photos disappear and if we do a partnership with Best Buy. Two horrific potential things. And I don't have the stats right with me. I have them in my presentation, but he did a multi-billion-dollar IPO. He has hundreds of millions of daily users on Snapchat, and he completely changed the industry. Now, Facebook has stories where the pictures disappear. Instagram has stories where the pictures disappear. LinkedIn has stories where the pictures disappear. They have a whole category now on social media of a copy of Snapchat, which when it came out, people were like, the stupidest thing I've ever heard is, why would anybody want their pictures to disappear? Yeah. And it turns out, in retrospect, that teenagers have a tremendous interest in having their pictures disappear, and partners who are having affairs have a tremendous interest in having their pictures disappear, and there's a lot of other people as well. So the reason that we almost didn't get Snapchat is because his different idea didn't look like a quote-unquote innovation. Innovations don't look like innovations when they come out. They look like mistakes. They look stupid. They look dumb. They look uninformed. They look ridiculous because there's already an industry standard of the internet is forever. On Facebook, you can have a legacy account where somebody can keep your account going after you pass away because the assumption is no one ever wants this stuff to disappear. And then Snapchat was like, what if it disappeared almost instantaneously? It sounded outrageous until it turned out to be amazing. And so I think the biggest reason that most companies won't actually be different is because different looks wrong based on the current markers of success in the industry that they're in, and doing so would cause everyone to laugh at them. And even they, when they think about it, don't even think of it as a good idea or a legitimate idea because it just looks like a mistake. And that's the beauty of it, by the way. I was just saying this because I just did a pink goldfish presentation and workshop in Texas. That's the beauty of doing it, because when you have a simple, obvious innovation, like let's say at gas stations, petrol stations, when they went to having a card reader right on the pump.
Yeah.
Well, once somebody did that, besides the cost, there was no barrier to every other petrol station, every other gas station doing that, and now every other gas station does it, right? Because it was like, oh, that's more efficient, it's faster. It met all the markers of what the industry is trying to do, right? Well, the beauty of innovation that's based on weaknesses and strengths is when you find a weakness that's also a strength and you use that as an innovation, it's oftentimes very, very difficult for people to copy it because they would feel ridiculous too, and they don't want to be shunned by other people in the industry, be made fun of by their peers. They don't want to be a laughing stock or to have something that fails. And so oftentimes, even if it's working, people know that the pink works for me, and people love it, but the most common response I get from people is, I don't think I could pull that off.
Yeah.
So it's working for you. I acknowledge it's working for you. I think it's fantastic. I won't do it though. And that makes that kind of activity the perfect differentiator, because it's not something people easily pick up and then, destroy the differentiated advantage that you created.
Yeah, good strategy doesn't make sense to the competition. They like, this doesn't make any sense, we won't do it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned this before, which made me laugh. My next book is called Bigger Isn't Better. Better is Better. Like, it is literally...
Are you serious? That's not true.
It is true. Go to every single podcast.
Good. That's crazy.
That's crazy. It's the standard. It's the standard question I ask every single guest, because it's the title of the next book. So bigger isn't better. Better is better. I've been working on it for almost a year. So
I'm going to sue you now. I'm going to sue you. Well, I guess Dan Pink's going to sue you or whatever.
So what do you think a better business looks like for you and most people you deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it. I mean, a better business is one that makes you happy, that makes you fulfilled, that, to your point, gives you energy and doesn't drain your energy, right? Something that you look forward. When you asked me to do this, and I've been done for the day since this morning. I had 3 coaching calls this morning, and I've been done for the day for the last 6 or 7 hours. And there was never a moment that I thought, oh boy, I got to do this podcast with Brad, and I got to talk to him about stuff, and he's going to ask me questions. And because this is what I love to do. This is what I want to do. I'm passionate about this. It's a good fit for me. It's interesting. It's stimulating, all these things. So I think we want a job. We want work that fills us up instead of emptying us out. And so I think that's the goal. The goal is better work for you and for anybody that you work with, is work that you look forward to and that you have a unique value to add, and that you find satisfying, even, and here's especially when other people don't find it satisfying, which then that becomes your competitive advantage too. Most people would rather die than give a presentation. Most people get incredibly anxious giving presentations. So I love to do what a lot of people would do almost anything to avoid. That's a huge competitive advantage. So one of the reasons I haven't scaled up my business, and certainly plenty of people have given me advice on that, is because I have a job where I've been done, like I said, for 7 hours today. I don't have any work to do tomorrow. If I'm on stage, I'm working. There's a few minor sort of things I have to do here and there, but I work a very small amount, and I could do a lot more business activities, but I get paid largely to be on stage and be talking to people, and I get paid very well for that. And I don't spend a lot of time working when I'm not doing that. So that's a good fit for me, and I don't want to spend my time managing other people's 401k account. I don't want to spend time dealing with employee emails. I don't want to spend time dealing with all the health insurance details of the people that are working for me. And so I have a small business, which is basically just me, because that's the right fit for me. I'm not telling other people they should do that, but that's what I think a good business is. A good business is a business that you're happy that you're running, you enjoy doing it, and there's a natural fit to sort of who you are, where you can instinctively and naturally bring the best of what you have every day to work, and that work over time is generally filling you up and not emptying you out. I think that's the ultimate. That's the absolute ultimate.
Love it. What's a book that you would recommend for our audience?
Yeah, so I grabbed it off the shelf. There's probably a little space behind me in the white book section there. It's called The Power of Different by Gail Saltz. So what she does, she's a psychiatrist, and she goes through, there's something called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is what a psychologist would use. If you came and said, I think I have ADHD, they'd pull out the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychological Association, and they'd go, they'd ask you questions that basically say, do you have this? Just like, do you have the flu or do you have COVID? They would ask you questions and evaluate your life based on those standards. And so she goes through the major categories that they have: depressive disorders, learning disorders, attention disorders. She goes through every major category, and she shows you the upside in a world where we only see the downside. In fact, it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for disorders, right? And she doesn't just show you the upside. She tells you stories about famous people who've had that disorder and have accomplished great things, but also people you haven't heard of who are just regular folks who have good jobs, but the job fits their unique disorder. And so she starts calling them differences, right? Learning differences, mental differences. And every chapter has a section called the gifts of, ADHD, the gifts of dyslexia, right? And it really is insightful, and it's really powerful. And I've read it 3 times. I've underlined it. It's just absolutely fantastic. And so if you have, kids who are different, and you do, if you have employees who are different, and you do, or if you just want more substance behind what we've been talking about, it's just an absolutely fantastic book, just to make you more open and accepting and understanding of the upside of a real broad base of people. And to your point from earlier, that's what I want people to know. Like you said, this is fun. I goof around, I wear pink, but this is a serious thing, and this is really true, and there's a lot of substance behind this and a lot of research behind this, and her book really does establish a lot of that concrete evidence for That this isn't just like some kind of bleeding heart thing or rose-colored glasses things. This is a reality of the way people work, and that the neurodiversity that we have in this world really does make it a better place. And if we rooted out all of these disorders, we'd actually destroy a lot of what's valuable about human beings in this world.
Thank you. How can people learn more about you and your business?
Yeah, my website is drendall.com, so D as in David, and then RENDALL.com. All my books are on there. All my videos are on there. There's an assessment of strengths and weaknesses that you can look at on there. Also, I've just started my own podcast a few months ago called The Imperfectionist Podcast, and they can find that if you just look up The Imperfectionist on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Yeah, that's the best way to find me.
What haven't we discussed that you wanted to discuss today?
I mean, I think we've hit it. I mean, those are the things I'm passionate about talking about. I want people to have better marriages. I want people to be better parents. I want people to have more fulfilling careers. And I think, again, getting away from, I got to overcome these things, I have to change these things, I have to fix these things, to really embracing and appreciating who you are, accepting and appreciating other people for who they are, and finding that strength, finding that upside, finding that advantage and tapping into it. I think that's what makes all of our lives better.
Thank you. Well, David, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. It's been a great chat, and probably a more fun and deeper chat than I hoped for. So thank you so much for your time today and the good work that you do. Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.